Welcome to another episode of The Breakdown. I'm so happy. There's certain chats that I get to do that just I get excited for, I get happy for, because I know that they're going to be simultaneously heavy, but also so much fun. And the guest that I've got for today's show is somebody that I just really enjoy talking to because she's all kinds of funny and also terrifying because I've seen what she can do to people who say horrible things. I have not ever been on the receiving end of that, and I hope to keep it that way. But I'm very excited to welcome back to the program, Doctor, PhD, Doctor, no, like medical doctor, Victoria Bucholtz. Victoria, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I'm a doctor of feelings.
Well, but not you're. If I remember correctly,
Uh-huh.
it's a doctor of a very specific part of history.
Yep. Well, so every PhD has like it's in like the humanities, especially like in history, you have several fields of research that you are knowledgeable on. So you have to pass these like examinations so you can teach. And like the topics are for me were like German history, military history, and gender theory. And when you sit these exams, it's like anything in those fields. So like I did modern German history. So basically from like the 1750s to now, you have to be able to talk about all of it. Um, so that keeps you really, really broad. And then when you do your actual dissertation, that's like a very niche, intense research topic. And so mine was looking at just after the First World War in Germany and looking at the rise of fascist organizations inside the military sphere through the lens of a history of emotions and looking at how these once powerful military groups now a little bit laid low after the Treaty of Versailles or the end of the war tried to influence political landscapes through weaponization of fear and anxiety.
We're gonna talk about whether or not there's any parallels to anything that's going on in modern day, but I want to have some fun first.
Sure.
Um, that's not all. Like that by no means is that everything that you do. You're also an advocate for two organizations, QCU and Momentum. For anybody who's unfamiliar, can you talk a little bit about uh, who they are, what they are? I know what QCU stands for. I don't want to give it away. It's up to you.
It's a surprise. It's a surprise. QCU is a collective. It's that we started. It's called Queer Citizens United, and we started back in I think 2022. And it was never really something we wanted to do. It was always a response to a crisis. And I look forward to the day that we officially disband QCU. Like it's not something that I want to keep as an existing power structure. I don't like those kinds of things. People get entrenched and there's all sorts of hierarchy things, and I don't like that. And so it started as a response to the attacks on drag storytime. We were seeing some very scary Christian nationalists target Reading with Royalty, our like drag story time here in Calgary, all ages drag shows, and nothing was happening to protect these venues and spaces. Overmatched security guards just kind of were letting them run rampant and pull fire alarms, and like bars and restaurants that these shows were happening at were totally overmatched by these guys who were up to cause no good. And so the community looked around and nobody was doing anything. So we decided to do it ourselves. So a group of drag performers and parents involved in some of the shows got together and we organized a community defense of those shows. And we also lobbied city council to put in the bylaw to make protesting around like libraries and things like that. There's the bubble zone. And it was very effective. And we were kind of like, great, like this worked. We outlasted the hate and things were going really, really well until Danielle Smith kind of gave us a new reason to exist. And that's when she announced last year her transphobic intended legislation. And so the focus of the group from community defense to more of a political lobbying group really happened out of necessity again. And I look forward to the day when there aren't protests around drag shows, which really have gone away. And I also look forward to the day when we, destroy bills 26, 27, 29, and there's no longer a need for that. And we can go back to doing whatever it was we were doing before, and just enjoy our lives again. So that's where QCU really came from.
And what's momentum?
Oh, Momentum is a great organization. I work as the Alberta regional organizer for Momentum. It's created by Faye Johnstone out of Ottawa, now Halifax, and it's the federal organization really looking to protect queer and trans rights. So I've been working with them for just over a year now. We ran the really spectacularly successful Drag the Vote campaign, and I'm really excited to let your listeners know that Drag the Vote is coming back for Alberta. We just got the graphics in place, like literally as we were in the run up to this, Faye texted me the graphics. So that's coming. And we've got like about 25, 30 of your favorite drag performers across the province, all the way from Fort McMurray down to Medicine Hat to Calgary, Edmonton, everywhere, who are signed up to urge people to use their votes responsibly, and to really watch those down ballot votes this year. Political parties have made things a little spicy in our municipal elections, and let me tell you this, the people who we're emailing people, we're asking them like, what's going on? Like, what are your values? What do you actually stand for? Especially in school board trustees. And these people have no comms training whatsoever. They are just sending us the most wild, like if you had seen this in a community association Facebook group, you'd be like, yeah, that tracks. Like just wild statements that like, I don't think they realize that you're showing your whole buttocks in public.
Well, it's so this the drag the vote is for the municipal elections, just to be clear.
Yes.
Okay.
This is Drag the Vote for all the Alberta municipal elections. We're
And
getting,
school boards.
and school boards. Yeah. Mayoral candidates, wards, and school boards.
I find it fascinating that your take on the municipal elections has been that there's some like the parties, there's like
Mhm.
one or two that are I think the word might be a little fashy. But the big ones are like the description I've used for the vast majority. I'm gonna get in trouble for this. The description that I've used for the vast majority of the big time political
Mhm.
parties are they are collective glasses of milk sitting on the counter, slowly assuming room temperature. Like there's nothing of substance going on with any of the big ones, and some of the mayoral candidates here in Calgary are just like, "What? Why are you doing this? I just don't get it." So it's wild to hear that some of them are. I'm gonna have to go read some of those responses now, I guess.
They're coming out. Yeah, we've actually had I always say there's a lot of ways to do activism. There's a lot of ways to get involved, and we've been really lucky that there's a lot of people who are allies or queer people who are very good at emailing, and we've been asking questions of candidates, and that research arm has really been paying dividends for us, and so we're compiling those. We're going to release a giant spreadsheet. Look out, nerds! Here it's coming of people's responses, and it's really simple. We're just asking people based on something that Momentum created to take the Rainbow Pledge. And it's very simple. It just says that you would uphold queer rights in the province or your riding or your ward. And yeah, some people are calling us a sickness and disease, and other people are, using various dog whistles. One person kept calling us a secret. I don't know what they were really talking to, but there's some interesting logic happening for people who want to run for school board trustee that I'm like, I don't know if you finished school. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. It's going to be an interesting take. I think we're definitely finding that there are some parties that have a collection of people who are very aggressively anti-queer, and right now, not to give too much away, but right now, a lot of the candidates that we're seeing for a better Calgary does not include queerness in that better vision. Unfortunately, we're seeing several responses from that party. Not everybody. but we're seeing several candidates within that party that are saying this, and now we're going to go back and ask the other candidates and say, well, people in your own party are saying this. Do you agree with this? I'm happy actually to see many of these parties be just like a clubhouse or like a branding team rather than an actual party. Because I agree with Mayor Jody Gondik and Courtney Penner and other independent voices, Harrison in Ward 9, like people who have said, like, I don't think this is going to lead to a reduction of the diversity of opinions on city council. If we're, having just two or three political parties, it's going to lead to, kind of the same situation that we have federally and provincially, where a lot of these come down to A or B, and a lot of other opinions get kind of squished down in party politics. And I don't think that should happen.
And I want to just say for the record, because it's it's bonkers that this needs to be stated, and I feel pretty confident that the audience, like the breakdowns audience, knows this, but I'll probably make a clip out of it just to piss off the Twitterverse. To be very, very clear, when you're advocating for queer rights, you're not advocating for like bonus rights. It's the same rights that everybody else gets, just not taken away for queer folks, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. When we say we're advocating for queer rights, we mean the same thing that everybody else gets. And whenever I'm online, people are always like, "What rights don't you have?" And I'm like, well, there's lots. I mean, there's literally three bills that have been passed to make trans people a second class of citizen in this province. So that's what we're talking about. That I don't think people realize that it was only in 2017 that gender identity was added to the list of protections. So you couldn't be fired for being trans. It's only in 1998 that sexual orientation, being queer, was protected. These rights are not that old, and they are constantly under attack and negotiation. So I don't think people realize, like, I think they kind of have maybe I'll be charitable here and say that they had thought there was a more rosy, protected worldview out there than was the case. But no, like, we've seen police raids in this city in the last, in 2001 was the last raid. Like, you think of those like in the 60s and 70s, and no, these things were happening all the time, even
Yeah.
recently in living memory.
Well, and I mean, in recent conversations, if we're going to talk about like what literal rights are, do trans folks potentially or not have, Danielle Smith has said that she's going to invoke the notwithstanding clause. She's included instructions in at least two ministerial mandate letters that clearly make it clear. If you'd like a list of the rights that the UCP want to take away from trans folks, all you have to do is take a look at sections 2 and 7 through 15 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and there you go. Like it's appalling that that's how shorthand it's gotten.
Yeah. Well, it goes against the framing of the notwithstanding clause entirely, which was designed to protect a French speaking minority against English language policies that might destroy Quebecois culture, which I think understandably, if you think of it from Quebec's standpoint, they wanted to protect their culture in a new negotiation of what Canada means in the 80s. I understand that. But the way the notwithstanding clause is being used now was never the way that they intended the framing of it, where the framer himself has come out and said, like, well, yes, they can violate human rights, but the rights you always retain are your political rights to overturn a government that is infringing on things or is doing things not in the interest of a population. But I don't think this person ever contemplated the idea that they would attack a population that's less than 1%. We are never going to vote our rights back into place. It is only going to happen through cis allies. That's it. That's like our whole game now is we need allies to step up and make this a day one priority in the government. And what we're really worried about is that this is happening in 2025. The election's not going to be till April 2027. Oh, wait, she gave herself another 6 months in office. So it's October 2027. Yeah. So are we still going to be an issue people care about, which is why I spend so much time talking to folks like yourself and talking to as many podcasts as I can in different media outlets. And that is to raise awareness of don't forget about us in the the new crises that are inevitably going to come because of this very incompetent and corrupt government. And there was something that I think you said at the rally yesterday that really stuck with me, and that was really trying to get people to hold on to not get lost in the cycle of chaos and things that are going on, and to really stand up for all injustices and keep making sure that they all matter.
Well, that's the piece because even on last night's show, and for the record, we're recording this on the 29th of September. One of the
Mm-hmm.
things that we noticed when we were putting together the show is Danielle Smith has on the rate on her radio show. Um, she says, "Oh, we have to do this to stop them from sterilizing children," which isn't a thing. Like puberty blockers don't sterilize children. My God, how many times do we have to say this? Um, but she also said we'll consider using it if the courts take too long. And she also has said that you can use the notwithstanding clause for the sports stuffs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not about, my God, we have to protect the children's reproductive rights. That's one lever, comms lever that she's pulling on to try to make people go, ah, this is so scary. But when we're talking about the sports stuff, when we're talking about any of the other pieces, and when she's talking about like, I just don't want to have to wait for the courts, like this is a laziness and a failure to commit to the rule of law from a conservative government that I don't know that I can recall seeing in the province before. I mean, like at least when Ralph was toying with it, and I'm not
Yeah.
a big fan of Ralph, he was like, "Oh, this is a populist thing. I don't. Eh, maybe we need to do this," but there was no sort of like bullshit rhetoric around it. It was just this is the tyranny of the masses, to paraphrase him a little.
Yeah, there's a consistent condescending tone with her whenever she talks about trans people that's really very frustrating. You saw it in that sickening video with the elevator music when she's like, some people are going to tell you that this is anti-trans and they're wrong. And it's like she's trying to legislate how we're allowed to even feel about her decisions, which is so annoying. And then most recently when she was incredibly condescendingly trying to explain this word salad around puberty as though somebody would stay on puberty blockers their entire lives. Like that was kind of the unspoken part where she's like, well, if we're doing these puberty blockers, that stops puberty. So that sterilizes like this, like, and like the way she was treating these reporters just beneath her. Like she really thinks that she's the queen of this province, and it's absurd. And that's why I can't try to get people to you know to talk and realize that this is not the conservative party that remotely was trying to conserve anything. Or I mean, Ralph Klein, obviously all of these guys, they had their massive issues, but there were times I feel like even in those governments where people rose up, pushed back, and they were like, oh, did we make a mistake? But with this government, it's like they believe that they are infallible, that everything that they're doing is right, and no matter what people say, they are right. And that's, I think, just so arrogant.
Well, she did that on the radio show too, where the host was like, "But you'll be like you'll be overriding some people's rights," and her response was, "Well, I believe that kids should have the right to reproductive health further in life." And it's
Mhm.
like, whoa, 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 whoa. Could we just stop and dissect that for a second? Because you're saying that your personal feelings as the premier and as a person override the Charter of Rights. Like, okay, if we're just doing, I believe that this should be a right, then I've got a list.
Yeah. Well, and that's just it. She's like, well, this is what I think, so I'm just gonna do it.
Yeah, it's wild. Hey, does this? I mean, there's two things that I want to make sure that I hit on, but I want to spend a little bit of time on this because there are some things happening in the world, and I think that Canada, to some degree, dodged a bullet in the last federal election because I think
Mhm.
that had certain um, short short people gotten elected. Uh, Nothing against short people. I'm just using a descriptor. Uh, we would have seen an acceleration of certain things across the country, but
Mhm.
Alberta certainly is the frog in the pot, as it were. I want to talk about the historical comparisons because a lot of people do say, "Hey, if you take a look at what's going on, there's some things that are going on that they have happened before." And I take a certain Battlestar Galactica view to the world of all of this has happened before, all of it will happen again. But are you seeing any parallels for things in your expertise that we should be concerned about?
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that the Canadian context has to be maybe studied specifically. There's some nuances to what's happening in Canada that do differentiate it from what's happening in America and particularly the UK. And I think we see an explosion of fascist policies in both of those. Um, there's there's sometimes a rush to say this is what happened then, compare it exactly to what's happening now, and say as if we can get 2025 to as closely approximate 1935, then that means that it's fascism. And I think that that is a fallacy that we fall into. Um, because it's the modern fascist movement, the neo-fascist movement. I always call it the neo-fascist movement because it is dialectical, it is self-referential, it is aware of what has happened in the past and how people rejected fascism previously. And so that's why modern neo-fascists will fight tooth and nail to never be called a fascist because that's one of the sacred things that after 1945 you cannot be. And so they're like, well, no, we're not fascists. We're, you know, Christians. We're national. They will call it whatever they want so that anybody, they're doing fascist things without the words, right? Like, and too often we were just like, oh, well, as long as you don't say the forbidden words, yeah, you can have a diversity of opinion. But what we really should have been looking at is intolerance and discrimination. But unfortunately, those topics weren't aggressively discussed. They weren't the realities of the injustice of the West wasn't aggressively rooted out after 1945. They were allowed to kind of slowly evolve, and things were tinkered with, and the civil rights movement made strides, queer rights made strides, feminism made strides, the Black Lives Matter movement, Me Too, all of these things incrementally were pushing at things, but the core of the rot remained that there are deep systems of injustice in our world, and that our lofty expectations of liberty and justice and equality were never real promises that were really made true. And so because we've tolerated this, that gave a lot of fertile ground for neo-fascists to exploit. And those differences now are being celebrated in negative ways in what Viktor Orban and the Hungarians call illiberal democracy, which rejects the fundamental premise that we're all created equal and we all should all have a certain basic dignity of life. Now, we've never really lived up to that because, as more left-wing scholars will point out, political liberty without economic liberty is a sham. Uh, to paraphrase Karl Marx, but there's a point there that we're not economically free. We're still in these power structures that massively transfer wealth into a select few while exploiting a lot of people. And that anger has been whipped up not by the left, which abandoned the workers in the 90s under guys like Kretchen and Clinton, who capitulated to corporate interests. So what was the difference? There's no real left-wing party when both parties are the party of capital. Both parties are like, well, but what if the money would be sad? We better cut social services. And nobody was really saying, what do the mass number of people want? We were defaulted to this like neo-capitalist era. And Donald Trump tapped into something that a lot of Democrats and liberals, and to a degree, the NDP left on the table. And that was the needs and the economic realities of the working class. As people were getting exploited more and more, the American dream or Canadian dream, or just being able to provide for yourself, was disappearing. And there's a lot of anger there. And they've tapped into that.
I only have a little bit left of time left. If you
I'm
could,
so sorry. I kind of went on a rant there.
no, that was good. That was good. But um, I have two other main questions that I want to sort of hit you with. We could do like 4 hours, I'm
I
sure.
know we could.
But hey, last time you and I had like a significant interaction of any kind, um, caused a bit of problems. It did.
It got a little spicy. Yeah.
Are you up for a little bit more spicy?
Let's do it.
Perfect. I have this theory about Charlie Kirk.
Hmm.
Oh yeah, we're gonna go there. Let's watch the algorithm throttle this episode. And see, here's my thing. And I want to preface this by saying I come from the peak privilege.
Hmm.
Cisgender, straight, white, middle-aged guy with a job. So like my baseline uh place on the oppression scale, I'm doing okay. Um I think though that there has been a lack of nuance in the conversation around the death of Mr. Kirk. And this is something that I wanted to try to explore with you a little bit because I think that there is a lot of disingenuous weaponization of people expressing relief that a source of oppression for them
Hmm.
is not going to be a source of oppression for them anymore. And I don't think that that has to be directly tied to hooray, he's dead. I don't think that there's that. I think that the hooray part comes from, oh, thank God, that source of all of those hateful things that he said. And he said hateful things. Let's be very, very clear about that. He used bad faith arguments all the time, and he was given a tremendous, tremendous platform. And he utilized that platform to punch down on vulnerable people. Um, I'm not saying, yay, he's dead. I don't think anybody should be saying, yay, he's dead. I don't think anybody should be celebrating the death of anybody. That's just my personal thing. But I can totally appreciate that for people who were the targets of his rhetoric, having that rhetoric no longer coming from that source is like, oh, thank God. Thank God that piece is done. Um, and I think that the more extreme elements of the right have conflated to some degree that relief with, hey, somebody died, hooray, let's all be happy that this person was publicly executed. I, I think that that conflation is very dangerous. I think it's disingenuous. But I wanted to get your thoughts on it because that's me coming at it with my like, I think that there is a line that we can draw between these two things that is not, hey, everybody, let's have a Charlie Kirk's dead parade. And um, hey, I'm really glad. I'm really relieved that I don't have to wake up and see what's the new thing that Charlie Kirk said about me today or my community today. Do I have any merit in that thought?
Yeah, I do. I think what is really happening is that we are talking about two separate but interrelated things. If you told me that a young man, father of two, was shot and killed, I would say that is that is wrong. That is bad. I do not want to see anyone killed. Right there. There's a person who is a victim of gun violence. Bad. If you were to also tell me in a totally separate related incident that someone who used to spew a lot of hate and discrimination against marginalized populations is no longer saying those things, I would say that's good. Now, if you tell me that's how that happened, obviously that becomes a mixed issue. Am I happy that there is a little bit less hate in the world? Yes. Am I happy with how that happened? No. That's
Yeah.
how I would look at it.
Okay.
Um, you know,
That's that's the nuance that's missing in the conversation because
sure.
you know
There's a
when
one other factor though,
okay.
and that is we have to go to our good friends, the Germans. They always have a word for it. And this is one that I think many people do know, and that's Schadenfreude. It is a well-documented thing. Schadenfreude is literally joy in wrongdoing, in guilt and shame and all these kinds of things. And basically that feeling of finding pleasure in a bad thing happening to a bad person is is obviously a very crass emotion. It's not a noble emotion that everyone's like, ah, yes, this person excelled in Schadenfreude. Like, this is not something that we uphold as a good virtue. It's in the category of watching Love Island. It's, yeah, we'll do it, but we don't pretend, we don't really talk about it on our list of our CV accomplishments. And I think that there is a certain karma, Schadenfreude, whatever you want to call it, to somebody who promoted violence, who said bombastic, ridiculous things about the need for guns and the need for and the acceptability of violent deaths at the hands of guns to then die at the hands of something that he supported. I think that you have to be devoid of any comedic appreciation to not understand that there is at least something there that maybe we don't want to admit it, maybe we don't want to talk about it, but you kind of have to look at it and say, oh, wow, of all the ways that this guy, I don't think anybody would be having this debate if he died in a car accident. I think that the method in which he died, there is obviously some kind of resonance with the rhetoric and the things that he promoted, that is the way that somebody decided to end his life, was in a way that Charlie Kirk talked about with his own statements.
I think that and this is where the nuance part of the conversation I find is lacking because on a purely uh moralistic, ethical reading of the situation, I don't have any problem saying he should not have been shot. That was a bad thing. I also don't believe kids should be shot. Uh,
Yeah,
I think that is also a bad thing.
I
Um,
don't I don't think he should be shot, but I also refuse to be forced to express sympathy for my oppressor.
100%. And that's where the difference is. Because I think that there is, again, that like he was part of a mechanism that pushed people down, certain people down, certain not white men people down.
Mhm.
And that was a very real, demonstrable thing. There's no getting around that. And so,
You know what though? I'll push back on one thing you said though. I do think he pushed down white men. I do. I
okay,
think that
I'll,
his brand of Christian nationalism, his brand of patriarchal control, I think it also harms men. It harms everyone. I think that it harms anyone who doesn't fit in that particular type of white straight guy that he's talking about. And I know so many wonderful white cis straight allies, guys who I look at and I'm like, you must be socially gay, even if you're not sexually gay. You know what I mean? Because they get it. These are guys who are wonderful and they stand up for everyone. And they are the types of positive masculinity. I had two guys at my show on Friday who are the archetypal, like they actually told me later, they're both from Fort McMurray, they're both work on the rigs. These guys are giant triangle shaped human beings with shoulders out to here, and they joke that they always skip leg day. These are guys that you would never think would be at a very gay drag show on Friday. They loved it. They got involved. They were wonderful guys. And they would be the guys you would think would be Charlie Kirk fans, and they're not. There's so many guys who don't want this. And yet, I think it's easy to look at what Charlie Kirk is saying and these kinds of things and how that whipped up a certain demographic and say, oh, well, this helped them. But I think it misses all the other victims that are also cis straight white guys, because there's obviously other groups that were far more disadvantaged. But I don't think this his rhetoric serves anybody.
I agree with that 100%. And this is where the last piece that I wanted to hit on
Yeah,
before, as I quickly check, I have enough, another 8 minutes. I'm going to make
we
them.
got time.
Um, eh, I think that there is also a separate conversation to be had about the comedy piece. I mean, we saw what happened with Jimmy Kimmel. Thankfully, here's the thing: I've never found Jimmy Kimmel to be that funny, but whatever.
Nope.
The notion that you shouldn't be able to make what is obviously a joke. Jimmy Kimmel was not standing on a pulpit on a Sunday morning. He was not delivering a speech in the public sphere. He was doing an opening monologue for a comedy show. And I'm a big believer in the whole tragedy plus time uh, equation. And I think, you can go to stand-up shows now and you'll see people making jokes about 9/11. Would I have recommended that those people make those jokes the day after? Probably not. Would I believe that they should have the right to make those jokes the day after? 100%. Uh,
Hmm.
and I think that that's another piece of the conversation that is missing because we dark humor is a way of processing things for a lot of people. I know in my line of work, some of the jokes that get made throughout our day, well, they're not for everybody, for sure. And I think that there's an argument about knowing your audience, but I think that it's really, really chilling when you say to people, you're not allowed to joke about that. Um, because there are jokes. I mean, I was listening to a stand-up comic a little while ago, and they were here. Did you hear JFK's reaction when he saw the Zapruder film? Blew his mind. Um, and it's an okay joke, but if you'd made that joke on November 23rd, 1963, uh, there would be some problems. But we have to be able to process these things however we need to process them. With your stand-up comedy background,
Hmm.
um, I mean, I play with humorism. You actually do the stand-up comedy, so you have a higher authority on this. What are your thoughts on that?
I have a couple of thoughts. One as a comedian, and one as a historian. And um, as a comedian, you got to know your room. There can be a room full of people who were victimized by Charlie Kirk, and making a joke about it could be received in one way because they are processing it through what we've talked about earlier about like a sense of relief that there's less hate in the world. Um, Not about what happened to him, but just about that aspect. If you make that joke in another room, people might be really upset. Why? Because they might feel hurt. They might feel upset about that. And that's not my goal ever as a comedian, is to upset my audience. So there's a time and a place, I guess, is what I'm saying, which is, I think, what you're saying. And the other aspect, though, is that comedy humanizes. And from a historical perspective, if you look at what a lot of Jewish comedians did in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, is they made jokes about Hitler. And you would think that this would be a sore topic that a lot of Jews don't want jokes to be made of, was about Hitler and the Nazis. And a lot of them didn't. But what it did is, by making Hitler a subject of ridicule and mockery and joking, it took him down from this pedestal of this larger than life evil spirit being monster, and said he was a man like anyone else who faced very specific circumstances, historically, personally, that created what he became. And when we humanized the Nazis and we tried to actually understand, wait, why did they do this? Why did people go along with this? We actually learned a lot about how these movements started. But if we just say Hitler was evil, he was a one-off, then we leave ourselves open to something like this happening again, because we're not breaking down the societal patterns that produce this evil. So for me, I think jokes and comedy is a way that we humanize topics that are quite scary to deal with. And it's important to do that because it's a way of starting a conversation in the right time and place.
I love that you said that. I literally, as you were saying that, I wrote down Charlie Chaplin, uh,
Yeah.
because I go to the Great Dictator, and
Mm-hmm.
that that film was a departure of sorts for Mr. Chaplin. Uh,
Absolutely. It was the first time he ever used his voice on film.
but it was I think it normalized the conversation about there's actually this thing going on that we need to be paying attention to.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's one of the reasons why when we start to see the reaction of you can't say that as a joke. Like I don't think people should be saying hooray, Charlie Kirk is dead. I would have pulled the trigger myself. I don't think anybody should be saying that because that shows such a degree of desperation and erosion of our social norms that we've got a very serious problem. When we're saying that the only way to solve our problems now is to be executing people, oh, we're getting real close to some things that some other folks have done. Um, and but I do think that to say somebody making a joke and that's clearly within the parameters of a joke. If you don't like the joke, that's cool. There's some jokes that Bill Hicks has made that I get real uncomfortable with. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to say Bill Hicks should have never been able to make those jokes. You have to be able to sit with those moments of uncomfort. And I would argue that if you're an adult, you have to be able to try to sort out why you're uncomfortable with them without telling people that they're not allowed to use words.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Yeah,
I think I don't think that should be used as a shield from consequences, though. Because
for sure.
if you go out and you say a bunch of things that people don't like and they don't want to watch your programs or see you on a streaming service or things like that, you know, those people are allowed to vote with their feet
Yep.
and their dollars if they don't want to see those things. But then we get into this, mass canceling moment and all sorts of things, and it can get very complicated very quickly.
For sure. I just think that also jokes should be funny.
That helps. Yeah.
Because,
I
like,
don't think jokes should punch down and be mean.
no. And I
I
think that
think,
good jokes always punch up. I think that when you
yeah,
see really good jokes that really make you laugh, they're mocking a power structure that has more than the people who are mocking it. And I think that that's critically important. And that's one of the reasons I mentioned this to you before. You have a new comedy album out,
I
new, newer. Your
April.
second.
My second album came out in April, and I did something that I never thought that I would do. I actually recorded a song for Pride. It's called Silly Little Guy. Myself, T Fanny, and Catfish the Wizard got together and we made a song called Silly Little Guy. And you can listen to it on all the streaming platforms. Just search my name, Karla Marx, Karla with a K, Marx with an X. And and you can listen to this little earworm that we made for Pride. It's very silly.
I did not know that there was a song. Now I'm going to go listen
Yeah.
to that. But the point that I was getting at is towards the end of the album, there's some moments that I described. It was like, oh, that was a little uncomfortable for me, where
Yeah.
you were throwing some shot. It's the cisgender straight white man, and I think that it's incumbent on people like as a cisgender straight white man, if I'm feeling some discomfort around those jokes, I
Yeah.
don't think that the appropriate reaction is to be like, "Oh, you should have made those jokes." It's to go like, "Oh, I'm going to think about why this is like weird and what the source like what's the motivation." Like I like to dissect the jokes and understand them. And I think that if you're not taking that approach with humor, then you're engaging with humor that's not appropriate for you.
Right. And I think that it's always like I love men. Men are great. I hate the patriarchy. I have no issue with straight people. I hate homophobia. And I think that sometimes when you're making a joke, you use those generalizations and be like, oh, straight people. I have no problem with straight people. Some of my best friends are straight people. My parents are straight. So I get it. Straight people are out there and they deserve respect and to be treated just as the same as queer people. So you could call me an ally to Stray Kids.
But see, I was about to do like this insightful little thing about if somebody's making jokes about straight people, you have to examine the archetype and understand what
Yeah.
is in the archetype that they're making fun of. And then you drop straight. It's in there.
Oh, I broke Nate.
Oh, that was fantastic. Um, last question, then I'll let you go.
Yeah.
one of the big things that I'm trying to do with the show now is for people who are members of specific communities, because we did a live show in Edmonton.
Hmm.
And one of the things that was really striking to me is the number of people who were like, this feels like community.
Yeah.
Being in the same room all together and listening to you rant. And I was like, that's a very strange community, but okay. Um, when we're talking about the members of the queer community, the trans community, the
Mhm.
2S LGBTQI, see, I'm
I see what you
reprogramming a
did
muscle
there.
memory.
Yeah.
Um, when we're talking about members of those communities, where are the places that you would recommend that they go for community? Because I want to leave it on a positive,
Absolutely.
not
Um,
Straggets.
this is why we do shows. Show like drag shows have been a a community network for so long. And so many drag performers have a very strong social minded aspect to their performances or a political minded, because, in the 60s and 70s, when we're rejected by our families and something bad happens, who do you go to? You go to your chosen family. And people would say, hey, you know what? Gary broke his leg. Like, we need to help him pay rent for the month. He's out of work. Okay, well, we'll throw a show and we'll raise a bunch of money. And that's where a lot of drag shows, community shows started. And there's still that element to it of people come together to support the art, they come together to support each other, to find people. So oftentimes, go to a drag show, go to them. They're really fun. There's queer burlesque shows. There's, book clubs. There's so many queer events that are going on in a lot of the major cities, some of the smaller ones too. There are a lot of things happening. The other thing that I've been really pushing, kind of very connected to what you've been talking about in terms of community, is that build your network. I look at folks that do Bible study and watch, Christian documentaries and go to see, these lectures and tent meetings and all these kinds of stuff. And I say, why don't we do things like that? Why aren't we engaging with people in that way? And I tell people, like, do you love film? Invite six people over and watch a movie together and then talk about it afterwards. Do you want to do a book club? Do you want to do a film club? Do you want to do D&D games, board game nights? But if every one of us has six friends that we can call up when times are tough and they've got each other's backs, that's how we build those massive grassroots movements of progressive values, is by knowing, hey, you know what? I am headed to the rally and I could call up those five people and they would come with me. I could have those conversations. That's the kind of activism that I think is quiet and dignified and noble, and it's going to be how we move mountains.
That's awesome. Victoria, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Like seriously, there's certain conversations that I go into with certain people that I know like this is what I can expect. And the one thing that I love about having conversations with you more than anything is I never know exactly what to expect, other than I'm going to at some point laugh my ass off. And I appreciate that so much. Uh,
Okay.
thank you so much for making the time today.
Nate, thank you for giving a voice and a network for people that think the way you do. And it's really cool to watch you more comfortably recognize that you have a role in this conversation. And I know you started out as just like, I'm just asking questions. This is crazy. Does anyone else see this? And I think it's been really cool to watch you accept the fact that a lot of people do see what you're doing and want to support you, and to just see you really like comfortably step into, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. And I really appreciate you having me on and giving a voice to so many people who see this, what's going on in our province and say, no, 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 this is not our Alberta. We're going to push back.
Well, that's very kind of you. Thank you. Um, Victoria Bucholtz.
Thank you.
And that's it for another episode of The Breakdown. As always, if you appreciate the kind of content that we're trying to produce here, we would love nothing more than if you thought about signing up to be one of our Patreon sponsors at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab, where for just the price of a fancy cup of coffee a month, you can help us continue to produce this kind of content. Whether you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, in which case maybe leave a review and a rating, or whether you're watching it on one of our streaming platforms, we want to say a big thank you to everybody who is part of the Breakdown's audience. And as always, take care of each other and keep the conversation going.